Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My name is Sulaiman Alaji Dauda from University of Malaysia, Faculty of Economics and Management. And I am here to present my conference paper with the title, Can Protection Motivation Theory Predict Consumers' Behavioral Intention Toward the Choice of Certified Sustainable Palm Oil in Klang Valley, Malaysia. There is general outcry that the proliferation or the increase in the palm oil industry or plantation will bring about adverse effects in the environment. So in order to mitigate the environmental threat, it requires not only policy, institutional policy by government, but also individual behavioral change. It is only when we adjust that the government will be able to implement its policy. But in order to make things much easier, what are these motivational factors that will drive individuals to adopt environmental behavior? We attempt in this study to predict environmental threats such as biodiversity loss, harmful emission of harmful CO2 carbon dioxide, as well as a result of unsustainable oil palms. Because most of the farms, or some of the farms here in Malaysia, are not certified. They are under the process. So those kind of farms that are palm oil palm plantation that are not certified are defined as unsustainable because their practice often go contrary to the laid down policy. So perception of such threats may prompt consumers to adopt, coping strategy by resorting to behavioral intention of choosing certified sustainable palm oil. Problem associated with certified sustainable palm oil or with the palm oil generally can be addressed through supply value chain mechanism by using eco-labeling and certification process. In that case, we have many certifying bodies that are having either global coverage or local content. Like Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil is trying to make all the palm oil in the world sustainable. Likewise, we have Malaysian Sustainable Palm Oil, which is the local content that try to make the Malaysian palm oil sustainable. So problem of oil palm industry or oil palm plantation is unregulated oil palm expansions, deforestation, displacement of indigenous people, loss of biodiversity, emission of harmful CO2, child labor, exploitation of labor, pollution of air, water, land, resources, and so on and so forth. So for long, environmental psychologists have propounded many theories that explain the action that reduce environmental threat. Such theory may include theory of plant behavior, norm activation model, value-belief norm theory of environmentalism, peer appeal, and protection motivation theory. So our theory that we will apply in this context is protection motivation theory. The objective of the study is to predict consumers' perceived threat and coping strategies that lead to their behavioral intention to choose certified sustainable palm oil. When people encounter conceptually, when people encounter environmental threat, they naturally activate their threat coping appraisal process. Threat appraisal evaluates persons' possible involvement with the risk or threat. For instance, the perceived sustainability to the threat from non-certified oil palm is referred to as vulnerability. And the extent of severe consequences from such threat is severity. Coping appraisal can be explained as a consumer's perception that adopting a certain behavior can remove or mitigate the threat. So coping appraisal concept is essentially divided into self-efficacy and response efficacy. This is our theoretical background and the development of hypothesis. We have threat appraisal process, which is grouped in under severity and vulnerability. And we have coping appraisal process, which is grouped under self-efficacy and response efficacy. We incorporated some variable that prevent that conceptualize involvement of RSPO, that is perceived threat from non-certified palm oil, that is threat appraisal under RSPO, and perceived potential efficacy of RSPO. These are our hypotheses. We assume that a consumer who perceives greater severity towards the uncertified oil palm will demonstrate more protection motivation. That is, if a consumer perceives that the non-certified oil palm will endanger the environment and endanger his livelihood or whatsoever, he will practice more motivation. He will practice more motivation protection. The methodology of the study we adopted is we determine the sample size, and the field of the study is Klang Valley, Malaysia, which has a population of more than 4 million. 8 locations randomly selected from the study area, and we applied a systematic random sampling procedure. And the data analysis using structural equation model, of which there are some parameters which will be achieved before you proceed. We first start by confirmatory factor analysis, where we did the analysis and find out that all the constructs are in line with the parameter which is predetermined to be achieved. Then we proceeded to measurement model and subsequently to structural model. So these are the absolute fitness indices. These are the fitness indices, and our absolute fitness indices, incremental indices, and parsimonious indices are all achieved under both the 3 models. And we come and correlate the matrix of the variable and find out that all the variables are within the specific parameter needed to be achieved. The square of average variance extracted is diagonal, are written in bold, while off diagonal is the correlation between the 2 constructs. Result of the individual confirmatory factor analysis has achieved the validity indices, namely construct validity, convergent validity, and discriminant validity. And our hypothesized regression weight for protection motivation theory, motivation in predicting behavioral intention. We said we wanted to see if we wanted to predict if protection motivation decision of consumer can lead him to behavioral intention of patronizing certified sustainable palm oil in order to promote the culture of conservation and reduce the emission of CO2. RSPO threat appraisal has been analyzed. RSPO coping appraisal, we find out that the threat appraisal is significant in that the consumers feel vulnerable and feel threatened in the absence of institutional arrangement like RSPO. Coping appraisal, we find it to be non-significant in that the consumers feel the process of RSPO in order to implement its principles and criteria is inadequate, which need to be revised and which need to be fully implemented. even though RSPO is a voluntary, non-governmental organization, but notwithstanding, it has to come up with some policy that will stop its members and its non-members from tampering with the natural environment. Severity of threat and vulnerability of threat is found to be insignificant because people feel they don't often see the activities of the non-sustainable palm oil as severe and they don't feel vulnerable to it. However, they still believe that they can be able to do their best to cope up. That is response efficacy and self-efficacy, which is found to be significant to cope up with the situation and to provide solution for the to provide for sustainability purpose. While ultimately our behavioral intention is found to be significant. That is to mean that the consumers are ready to overcome the problem associated with non-palm oil, and they are ready to support any institutional arrangement that will bring about sustainability. Our finding is in line with Jiam et al. 2016, in that he predicted consumer willingness to pay premium for the product containing CSPO in both Japan and in Malaysia. Also in line with consumers' preparedness to support reducing emission from deforestation and forest degradation mechanism to minimize deforestation by certifying all wood products sourced from the tropical forest in Malaysia. In the same way, our findings indicate consumers' preparedness to support RSPO, to conserve biodiversity and minimize CO2 emission, which will allay their perceived threat and activate their coping strategy to address the effect of uncertified oil palm and unsustainable palm oil. This has been our